The United States enacted its Section 301 tariffs today, imposing 10% to about 12.5% tariffs on countries it deems to have committed forced labor violations. This includes South Africa. South Africa was grouped alongside major economies, including China, Japan, and South Korea. This after the Office of the United States Trade Representative determined that its enforcement of bans on forced labor imports was inadequate. The tariffs form part of a broader action against 60 economies that the Trump administration says have failed to effectively prohibit the importation of goods made with forced labor. For more on this now, we're joined by a trade specialist and president of the African Prosperity Fund. That's Yavi Madurai. Thank you so much for your time, Ms. Madurai. It's always great to chat. So, is this fundamentally a dispute about weak enforcement, or is it also being driven by broader U.S. trade and geopolitical interests? Because that's the question everyone is asking.
The second part. If you look at it, and if you look at the countries, it's not rocket science, right? If you look at the countries that the tariffs are being imposed on, and you're looking at it from the perspective of human rights and, labor issues. So now what we're looking at is specifically from a enforcement and a law perspective, you're now looking at products that they are trying to bring to the attention of the world by saying these products are made with forced labor. And if it's made with forced labor, because that's the sentiment now and the narrative that is starting, to drive this agenda, is that if it's made with forced labor, should it be allowed? And according to World Trade Organization rules, forced labor products shouldn't enter global supply chains for specific reasons. I mean, we've seen the issues, for example, in the past, in the way past, when it comes to China and the forced labor issues and how, the products were impacted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now if you use that as the context and you start looking at it from the perspective of why this narrative needs to start coming into play, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is more about geopolitical shifts, shall we call it, as opposed to what is actually what we're talking about.
And when we take the time to now zone into the specific sectors, South Africa's automotive, agriculture and manufacturing sectors are expected to be among the hardest hit. That's the reality. And in practical terms, what does a 12.5% tariff mean for exporters, jobs, as well as the competitiveness of the South African products in the U.S. market?
So just to be able to put, for us to start from a background perspective or a context perspective, these tariffs have been put in under ad valorem, which simply means according to value, right, in Latin. And what that simply means is that it's based on the value of that particular product. So they very cleverly have not attached it to specific categories. They haven't attached it to specific products. They have said it's across the board. Now, what that does to the industries that you have just listed is that it attacks those industries by default, because that is the industries, or those are the industries that are the most exposed, the most vulnerable from a U.S. perspective, right? So when you look at it in terms of the way that it's been done, and it's attacked it from, and I use the word attack very loosely because I want to put it into perspective of how it's being looked at. And it's being looked at in terms of being able to limit our capacity to be able to then export. Now, if it is light vehicle manufacturing is one of our major industries from a South African perspective, obviously it's going to have hard economic impact purely because where are our global markets when it comes to vehicle manufacturing? We already know, for example, right? We already know that factories have been shut down. northern parts of Johannesburg and Gauteng, most of those factories are starting to shut down, or they're minimizing, or they're getting smaller in terms of exactly size and fleet size, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're already seeing the impact of what the first round of tariffs have done. The second round of tariffs are there to make sure that we understand what the agenda is.
And just on the same breath, what realistic options does South Africa have now? Can these tariffs still be challenged or negotiated through diplomatic or trade channels? Or will businesses have to adapt to what could become a long-term sort of shift in US trade policy?
So I think to answer your questions, I want to be able to say to you that in an ideal world, we should actually be starting, we should not now, we should have, but obviously that didn't happen. We needed to be able to look at it from the perspective of other markets. We spend so much time and effort on AGOA, whether we like it or not. And this is not about, pointing fingers and saying, oh, well, AGOA, what happened to AGOA happened to AGOA. But the point of the matter is that if we didn't learn our lesson from the first round of tariff hikes, why haven't we done more about it in the last couple of months? And hopefully, governments, not just us, but other governments are also starting to. But for us, it is important to understand that we always had available markets to us that we just never saw as available markets. Now, I know that for those who know me, I'm like a stuck record when it comes to the African Continental Free Trade Area, or AFCFTA, but that has always been our answer. The recent immigration issues and all of those kind of immigrant issues and all of those kind of issues that have impacted our ability to be able to now start having different conversations, because all we should have been having conversations about is Africa as our market. They are right here. Why we did not see Africa as our primary market, I don't know. But in terms of us going forward, we need to understand the game is not about to change. The game hasn't been changing. The game has changed, and it changed a while ago. It changed the first day that our first tariffs were increased. So my only answer to you is that we need to start understanding that AGOA and the US can no longer be seen as our primary or only or major or whatever word we want to use in terms of that particular market. We need to start becoming far more exposed. We need to start having multiple markets. We cannot put all of our eggs in one basket. We need to start taking our own advice in terms of what we thought or how we wanted to be able to operate in the trade environment. So I do think that as hard as this is going to be for us to swallow, we need to take it, and we need to understand that if this hasn't forced us to look at other markets and start becoming serious about other markets, especially Africa, then I don't know what else is going to do that.
Okay, I must thank you so much for your time and insights on the program. Yavi Madurai is the president of the African Prosperity Fund. Thanks so much indeed.